צהריים טובים.
Good afternoon. Of course, it goes without saying that when one must remember challenges when you deploy them quite widely that Israel has to face, then it's pretty endless. So I chose a number of focal points that are on the agenda vis-à-vis strategic issues and social issues. I mean, of course, this does not exhaust them all, but one can perhaps disagree with my positions, but I am only going to say exclusively my own personal position. In these regional developments over the last years, there has been an improvement in Israel's strategic maneuvering space. I'm talking about in a regional war with fronts between the Sunni extremists and the Shiite ones. There is a dismantling of countries that are falling apart, like Syria, Iraq, that in the past were part of that, the actual relational threat that we saw. They used to call it the Eastern Front. And they have changed. And of course, also changes, not in regional fronts, but in for example, 6 months ago, the fact that the American administration was swapped. So the threats are still numerous, and I suggest we analyze them very carefully. And it is better to be cautious in our policies without taking unnecessary risks. And I think the political issue on the agenda already, there is a renewed negotiation process that has started with the American brokerage. It has started now already, this American process with the Palestinians. In other words, the improvement of the positions of both sides so that there may be a future agreement, settlement. We often hear the term a regional process or a political regional process. I would like to relate to that because very often people think it is sort of monodimensional. This could serve the Israeli interests just as more Arab countries are willing to participate, the situation will be improved for us, while creating some kind of affinity or affinity between the Palestinians and the Hashemite kingdom. There were all sorts of other ideas. I remember the head Major General in Reserves, Giora Island, spoke about swapping of territories and all these possible ideas. I think all of them that sort of bind other countries around us into this process. But I believe that the more these Arab countries are involved, supporting the possibilities for concessions from Israel and wielding pressure on Israel, it will not only will it not tally with Israel's interests, but it is totally in contradiction to Israel's stand. Israel always wanted direct negotiations, and it didn't actually really like the idea of international sort of factors helping them. Now, this issue, when there is an identical sort of interest between Israel and the various moderate countries, if we talk about curbing Iran's possibilities, it may help the situation now and in the future. In other words, a regional political is not a process, is not a panacea. So we have to ensure that it really does tally with Israel's interests. We can't just throw all these ideas in the air without really analyzing them. So the aim of this process should not be back to the equation of establishing a Palestinian state in Judea and Samaria. The separation from the Palestinians, if you remember we spoke about that, has already taken place. And it happened in two stages. First of all, the implementation of the interim agreements and the establishment of the Palestinian Authority, and the unilateral steps of disengagement from the Gaza area. Now, after all, we cannot give up our security control, nor can we actually open the demographic gates from Jordan. The establishment of a Palestinian state in Judea and Samaria will not solve the demographic problem. It will create a demographic problem. A kind of stampeding of Palestinian refugees and those who are not Palestinians. There's a country just near us that's created hundreds of thousands of refugees, Syria. So in other words, bringing that in will actually change the entire demographic equilibrium. And that will only happen if we do agree to the establishment of a Palestinian state in Judea and Samaria. This is the right time now, because we do not only have security vested interests in Judea and Samaria, but we have a demand for those that we now still have control over, and we're not handed over the Palestinians. Well, it's 50 years since the unification of Jerusalem, since the Six-Day War. The construction in those areas is not compulsory in order to retain our majority, the Jewish majority. We have to. I mean, there's so much illegal construction, Palestinian, in the Arab neighborhoods, and a leakage of Palestinian population to Jerusalem from Judea and Samaria. This is changing this demographic ratio. Thousands are leaving Jerusalem from all the sectors every year because there is no supply of accommodation. So the demographic balance is changing the whole time. If after the Six-Day War there were 75% of the residents of Jerusalem Jewish, now there are only 64%. And the significance of that is that if that is not changed, of that construction in the Jewish neighborhoods, we're going to lose the majority within 15 years of the Jewish population. And therefore, now we must build in Jerusalem in all its parts, in Givat HaMatos, as it is called, and in the western neighborhoods, wherein after the Safdie program was archived, we really has to carry on.
We must. We have the duty to guarantee the future of the city and the Jewish majority in the city, and the matter of construction in Jerusalem cannot be put off anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are 100 years after the Sykes-Picot agreements, and those have divided artificially the Middle East into states in a scheme, on a map by the superpowers, and this, in fact, is completely passé. Syria will not return, will not go back to being one state. Iraq, neither. In this historical junction where the Middle East is changing its face so much, Israel must define its interests in a way that is very clear and act upon them. The referendum in Iraqi Kurdistan that is supposed to take place in September is good news for Israel. The Kurds are now the biggest people in the world, the biggest population in the world who do not have a state. They have been neglected one time after the other by the superpowers. They're a moderate nation, they're advanced, they always had friendly relationships with Israel, and perceive Israel as an example. The Kurds, like the Jews, are a minority in the area, and the relationship with them is a relationship that has a potential for a substantial alliance. The Kurds have proven in Syria and in Iraq in recent years, they've proven themselves as a military force that has been able to chase ISIS away from the battlefield. Kurdish independence is a very good news for a variety of reasons. I will mention just a few of them. It would prevent the artificial taking over of tyrants over this people. It would break the conception of the holiness of Sykes-Picot enforced borders. It will encourage other minority groups in the region to serve as a natural territorial base to operate, that will enable the United States and other forces to operate freely and without concern or fear. And we will see where Turkey stands on this matter in a few years. It will also serve as a balancing area in this area and as a block to radical Islam. Israel continues to hold good relationships with the Kurds. This is the time when official Israel is to voice clearly its support of the independence of Kurds in Iraq. This is what we have on the table right now. There is a battle and de facto autonomy in northern Syria. I'm talking about things that pertain to the referendum in September and will be derived from the referendum in September. I think that Israel needs to act vis-a-vis its allies in the West to support Kurdish national aspirations. This should not be left in the hands of the traditional ministries of foreign affairs throughout the world that are still submerged in the anachronistic perceptions of Sykes-Picot borders that have no leg to stand on in reality. I hope that President Trump will be able to influence the new world order in the Middle East, and that countries such as Iran and Turkey in recent weeks are only strengthening our support of the Kurds. Ladies and gentlemen, in the time out that Iran has taken from promoting its nuclear plans based on the nuclear agreements with the superpowers, it is operating in the sphere in order to reach regional dominance in other spheres. We could identify today a quantum leap in the way that Iran and Hezbollah perceive Israel. This is expressed in the military strengthening of Iran in Syria, and also in a very significant process for us, the establishment of precision-guided missiles and the infrastructure for building those missiles in Iran. Israel should draw red lines regarding the deployment of high-quality Iranian weapon systems in Syria. And particularly important, as I said, from the Israeli point of view, it's the Iranian move to build factories for the production of those missiles in Lebanon. The goal of building those missiles and their ability to harm or hit energy facilities and infrastructure facilities is very, very clear. It is about creating equal damage, unsufferable damage for Israel, and Israel must prevent this development. I would like to take a few more minutes, more than what I have left, to refer to a few social matters, and I see the head of the Budgets Division. How many days more do you have in office? 40 days? Maybe in the last 40 days you will be able to implement a few of the things that I am about to say. Israeli governments have been, it won't help. I will finish what I have to say and then I will leave. it actually challenges me to go on beyond the time allocated to me. The Israeli governments have been able to meet most of its macroeconomic challenges in recent years: growth, unemployment, deficit, and other goals. The Israeli economy is strong despite of different issues that exist and that need to be addressed, such as deregulation. We have not registered similar success in the social sphere, and the main reason for the lack of success in social matters is that these governments, all governments, have not set measurable goals for social matters like those in the economic sphere. The government needs to set clear, measurable goals in economic matters. I'm not going to delve into the topics themselves. It could be poverty, housing, any other matter, but they need to be very clear and measurable. There's no doubt that in lack of those goals, we will not be able to solve problems. We will only see the escalation of these social problems. The second and final point is that we must move to social national planning, dealing with a few very clear problems. The retirement crisis that is imminent in Israel and in other places in the world is something that we will have to deal with, and without planning for it, we will see the shrinkage of our retirement, our pension funds, our retirement money, as a result of the change of proportion between the years that we work and the years where we enjoy the fruit of this labor in the form of our pension funds. We must have very broad development plans in order to deal with these issues. And I recommend that we examine steps that enable people to start working at an earlier age, have a differentiated retirement age between the more eroding professions and those that are less so, an element of expanded stipends, expanded pensions for people whose pensions were eroded in a certain way. The government needs to decide if it wants to continue with a universal policy or a differentiated one. But without planning, the position of the poor, elderly people will grow and become a mass problem in severity and in scope. Thank you very much.